It is now 6:30 PM, and we wish to call the Burnsville Economic Development Commission meeting to order. And the first thing on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda, and we could stand for a motion. So moved by Commissioner Grazzini, seconded by Commissioner Vanderlaan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We then will now look at the minutes from our last meeting, November 9th, 2011. And each of the commissioners have been forwarded a copy of the minutes. Are there any questions or corrections, changes needing to be made? Hearing none, do we have a motion? Commissioner Sturts, seconded by Commissioner Reber. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, the motion passed. Item number 3 on the agenda is a presentation that we will be able to witness on Trunk Highway 13 and County Highway 5. And here to present is our city engineer, Ryan Peterson.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Thanks for letting me talk to you for a few moments about this project. I greatly appreciate the opportunity. As you stated, this is to discuss the Trunk Highway 13 and CSAH 5 interchange project. I'll just give you a background and then open up for any questions you have. The agenda, I'll go over history of how we got to this point and an overview of what that project actually will entail. Discuss briefly a joint powers agreement with Dakota County, costs and funding. We've had some open houses, let you know what we've heard from the businesses out there and how we're trying to make the project as palatable as possible for them. Discuss some of the parcels that we have to take and some of the economic development that will hopefully spur after our project is done, and then just allow any questions and comments that you might have. I show here 2005 as our beginning with the preliminary study. Members of the council, Burnsville City Council, have been trying since before 2000 to try to get some funding. So things were in the works before then, but in 2005 we actually got some federal aid on the project to actually start a preliminary study and obtain right away where we could if there was willing sellers. So we utilized that money to get a preliminary study underway. Also complete environmental work out there. That would be the EAW that in 2007. We did find one willing seller, the old Little Saigon restaurant. We were able to purchase that. That moved us up to 2010 when we'd actually found more and more funding as we moved along through those 5 years. So by the time we got to 2010, it was feasible to start preliminary design. That's where we refined the study. We are done with that at this point, and then we're actually in the midst of final design right now on the interchange project. The Dakota County has also started the right-of-way acquisition process, and we also signed a joint powers agreement with Dakota County, and that basically is, for lack of a better term, is meaning the city's all in on the project. We're moving forward on it if we have anything to say about it. The layout, there may be a lot of varying degrees of who's seen this and what the project is all about. I don't know if you can see the cursor on the screen there. Mm-hmm. You can, okay. So 35W is over in this location, Savage is over here. This is Trunk Highway 13 and County Road 5. Right now, County Road 5 and 13 is an intersection, so they're at the same grade, I think, as you're all aware. The idea of the project is to actually lower Trunk Highway 13 into the ground 20 feet and have a bridge for 5 that will go over Highway 13. So if you're going southbound on 35W, and you want to go west on 13, what you do is you'd go downhill and then go under 5, and then if you wanted to get off on 5, you would just take a regular freeway loop up, and this would then go uphill to meet the grade of where that is now. And then if you wanted to go down to Williams Drive, you'd go like that. There'd be stoplights in this location, and this location. If you were coming from 13 from the east, once again, there'd be an off-ramp here, so up to 5, and then if you wanted to go back on, the same thing. So there's ramps in all 4 quadrants to get you on and off, just like a typical freeway. This is an existing frontage road. That frontage road will be relocated up to this location, so that's how we're going to make sure people can still get to Menards and that sort of thing. In this area, right now, there's right in, right out accesses there and there. Those will be closed, and we'll be building a section of frontage road in between them. Right now, there is no connection there. So if you're on 5 and you want to get to Perkins, let's say you could go take the frontage road and go all the way through, which you can't do now. In this location, there's a right in, right out, and this would be like Park Jeep in this location. That will also be closed. The reason is it's basically safety is why those are being closed. We would never have gotten money from the state or federal government for doing the project if these were to remain open. So if you're going to have cars moving faster, these uncontrolled right in, right outs are a dangerous situation. So that's the basic gist of the project. In a nutshell, there's a lot more details, but I think you kind of get the idea of what we're doing there. Schedule, we hope to be underway on some of the side roads later this fall yet, and then the main work on 13, the lowering of it and that sort of thing would mostly be in 2013. We hope we can get it done in one construction season, but it might go into 2014. It's undetermined at this time. The rest of the bullets here are basically what I was explaining in the map. We talked about the joint powers agreement with Dakota County, making us all in. Maybe the key facet to that is after you subtract out the state and federal dollars, there's a remaining portion that the local governments have to pay Dakota County and the city of Burnsville. And what, per Dakota County's policy, all the remaining costs we paid 55% by Dakota County and 45% by the city of Burnsville. The joint JPA also talks, it's got attorneys write it, so there's all the legal things about liability and who's going to maintain things afterwards. So you got to have all that stuff nailed down. And one interesting thing we typically don't get in a joint powers agreement with Dakota County is that we're actually getting a sound wall to help these residents who are so close to Trunk Highway 13. So the sound wall will go from here to here, this is Valley Drive, I think, yeah. One of the areas that'll be closed off. And then from here to here, it'll actually be sitting on a big retaining wall. As you can imagine, there'll be big retaining walls in the area if we're going to have to sink the road down 20 feet into the ground. Economic development, the funding sources and requirements for the project. The federal government has allotted almost $10 million for the project. MnDOT's almost $20 million. We received a grant from the Dakota County Community Development for $200,000. Almost $9 million from Dakota County, and the city of Burnsville has $6.3 million for a total of almost $45 million project. So this is obviously a very expensive and massive project for us to be undertaking. You look at $6.3 million city dollars, that is a lot of money. There's no doubt about it. I just would like to point out that when they did the interchange at 35 and 70 in Lakeville, I think a few years ago, the locals, I'll call them, Dakota County and the city of Lakeville, paid 63% of those costs. Whereas here, we're paying a third less. In other words, on this project, we got a lot more federal and state dollars to help pay for it. So although $6-point-something million is a lot of money, in my world, it's a bargain. But granted, I understand it's a lot of money for the city to take on. We've had open houses, and where the people could talk to us who will be affected by this. Basically, one of the key factors is the staging. Is it going to be 2 lanes in each direction during the project? You know, if we're sinking it down 20 feet in the ground, you aren't going to be able to drive where we're building it. Or will there be 1 lane in each direction, or would we close the whole thing off totally for a period of months? We didn't think closing it off totally works for the businesses in the area. We'd hate to actually have them closed down because no one can get there. And 2 lanes in each direction was too expensive, and actually for construction were very difficult to do. So we ended up with the 1 lane in each direction. Curiously enough, if you remove the stoplight at 5, which will be happened at the time, you'll just go free flow right through 5. They're expecting the highway to operate just as well as it does now. In other words, that signal is basically worth one entire lane of capacity. which gets right to the point of why we're doing the project. Also, we'll know that some of the other side roads will get used a lot more to get into the areas. So at Washburn Avenue, which was the first intersection to the west, we'll be upgrading that a little bit to help with the additional traffic. And then I don't know if you've ever driven on Cliff Road between 35W and to get into the Kramer Quarry up there in the mine. That road is in really tough shape. So we think a lot more people might use that during the project. So we're going to overlay that section of road too to make it more palatable for the people who might be going in to buy a Jeep or something like that. So we're trying to see what is going to happen or how the people are going to get in alternately and make those as best we can. One final change we had was this, once again, is Highway 5. This is Trunk Highway 13. This is the existing alignment of the frontage road in the northeast quadrant, so this is that U-Haul that's there. We're showing not having access at this location, the road was going to go up this way. The business owners said, no, that's not going to work for us, so we were able to redesign it so that they could keep the access the same way. I guess my point on these last few minutes has been the businesses are talking to us. We're attempting to listen the best we can. Certainly there will be situations where it's going to be tough on them when we're building, but we're trying to do what we can to make it as painless as possible. This slide also represents the parcels that we have to buy out totally to construct the project. Those include the Valvoline Oil Change, Little Saigon Restaurant, Taco Bell, an auto glass store, the long-closed Sinclair gas station, Famous Dave's, and the carpet store. So we have to buy those out totally to build this project. And the county is undertaking that, and they hire someone who actually will try and help them relocate. So, you have a question?
Yes, I'm curious. Going on the south side of 13 from 5 to 35W, what's the zoning where there was homes and is that going to open up some commercial zoning at all, or is it commercial?
Maybe we should open up this map. Are you talking
Right in that area.
this area? This are all single-family homes.
I know, I realize that.
Oh, and they've been there since the early '60s. I don't think they're
No thoughts to that, Jenny?
Commissioners, the property behind the noise wall is zoned R1, single-family residential. The properties where Ryan was just pointing out that would be take properties, those are commercially zoned properties. I believe it's B4 to be specific. In all of those takings, if you could put that slide back up, Ryan, there may be an opportunity where there's some vacant parcels that are left over that are created by taking down a few buildings, and after the road is built, there may be some land that's available. The county will leave that to the city or the EDA to find a buyer for that, and then we would have to reimburse the county, if there's any money that's made on that. So there may be an opportunity for some future commercial uses on any remnant
On the
parcels.
south side of 13 there?
Do you want to point those out, Ryan, where we think those would be?
Oh, sure. That actually is my next slide here.
Well, I guess my thoughts is, I recognize you got a wall there. Is there a trade of dollars to change zoning in that south side to commercial and then forget about the wall?
No. I can answer that. Nope. There's been no discussion of trying to buy out a bunch of homes. That, I believe, would be totally cost prohibitive.
Okay.
So, and then, once you do put a wall up, of course, then that, we won't be looking for anything behind them, but.
Question, Ryan? That sound wall on the south side, will that be, where's the frontage road here? On the north of the wall or south of the wall?
Yes. Madam, or Mr. Chair, I'm used to talking to the mayor. Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, my bad. The wall will be between the frontage road and 13. So it'll go 13 wall, frontage road, homes.
Okay, good, okay.
The other question I have is, how do you get to the northwest quadrant which we're trying to develop from this plan?
Let's see, I think the best one here is probably to look here. The extent of the project basically are in yellow here. 126th Street has always been here. This road does go north right now. It's more of a small road without curb and gutter and that sort of thing. But this will stay in place. So if you're coming from 35 and you wanted to get into this area, once again, you would go here, you go under 5, up, at a stoplight, make a left, and then you'd be into the area. Or you can go straight through the intersection, down here, and visit all these businesses as you always have been able to.
Following 5 north, there's no plans at this point to go into the northwest quadrant there?
It's on a future plan. There's no funding for that particular, that development most likely would make that particular part of the MRQ project move forward if it does.
Commissioners, if I can add to
Go
that,
ahead, Commissioner.
Chair, Commissioners, what we are trying to do is, as a city, we see this as an opportunity or catalyst for future economic development in the MRQ. That's probably where you're getting at. We don't foresee in the short term to have funds to extend County Road 5, as you've seen on our long-term plan, as a 4-way road. Kind of goes up behind Yellow Freight and then connects up to 35W. We don't foresee that with this project. But what we do see is an opportunity perhaps to improve some properties that are there. A lot of properties in the Lady Bird Lane, DuPont area, which is just down the hill. Ryan, if you could point to that, up in that area where the dirt piles are. They have a lot of bad soils, and there's extra soil that could be available with this project. So engineering staff and Skip are currently working, contacting the property owner, seeing who's interested in becoming part of a soil remediation project where we can take this extra dirt and utilize it because it's so close, so it'll save costs on this construction project and at the same time help property owners who have some soil needs in the area in the MRQ, which will eventually ready their land for development. We also have on the horizon that's in the CIP after this project is done is improvements to the Cliff Road and 35W interchange, so that will make access from the north coming into the MRQ a lot more accessible. That's where all the trucks are at Kramer. So making some improvements there. And then also improving DuPont Avenue, which is the road that connects here to County Road 5 right up through that area. So rather than build a new County Road 5, which is out of our budget, use the right-of-way that we have. Let's make the improvements that we can to make that kind of the throughway. And so we can do that at a reasonable cost. And we think that is our best opportunity to spur any economic development as a part of this project.
Okay, question. You brought the topic up, a change to the Cliff Road 35W exit. Is the presentation that MnDOT made still the one that is being contemplated? And that was about a year and a half ago, maybe. And they were talking about closing down the one, Black Dog Road, and combining the Black Dog Road exit with the current Cliff Road exit to form a new one that would be further north of the current Cliff Road.
That is not the plan that would be contemplated that we're talking about here. We're talking about making improvements to the existing off and on ramps at Cliff and 35W.
Okay. But MnDOT, I think in their longer
Yes.
range plan, was thinking of going from 2 interchanges down to 1,
Correct.
but I haven't heard anything else about that.
Yeah, we haven't really either.
Okay,
So
okay.
it still remains in our long-term plan. That's what makes sense because they're too close together. It just isn't a priority, and there really isn't money there right now to make that happen. So, but we recognize there's an opportunity here to have some potential economic development in the MRQ, and we're trying to do all that we can to make that happen as soon as this project gets going and is complete. That's what we're counting on.
Yeah. Well, this project,
$45 million project, an infrastructure project, could spur a lot of economic development in that
Long overdue.
quarter.
correct.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
We've been talking about this for 6-7 years with Mike Beard and folks at the state capitol, so it's a good thing that it's happening.
And just to bring more people through the area,
Right.
through the MRQ, and make this interchange.
Was it
lot
a
more accessible.
requirement for 169 and 13 to be addressed at the state capitol in conjunction with 5 and 13? Were they kind of together as a state concern, or were they individually looked at? That's just more of a personal question.
They were individually looked at. One could have went without the other.
Okay.
So it's,
Surprises me, but
yeah, we're hoping the one will be done, the 13 and 101 will be done before we get to our project. But they were considered separately. We got our funding separately.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay. I was almost, basically, we were talking about parcels that might be available for development. I think this is the old gas station and the glass store. I think we'll be able to combine those together and have one really nice parcel there. Famous Dave's, the big problem with that is access. We can't provide an access off of 5, so we have to figure out, can we go through here and to provide or not? If so, we'll hopefully get something back in there. We've heard the carpet store would consider basically rebuilding there again. We have to buy them out. We'd have the first chance of buying their parcel back. And right now, the frontage road will go through right where the building is now, so we can't save it. And then these areas in green and yellow are tax forfeit properties owned by Dakota County now, so they would be available for development. But they have a definite. There's a reason no one wants them. And the reason is the old Metropolitan Stadium concrete's buried underneath it. So we got to try to get that out of there.
Good footings.
Great for the footings indeed. But Skip and I will be working on trying to get a grant to hopefully get these cleaned up soon, or perhaps with the project.
So if a grant could be obtained to remove or remediate those green areas, theoretically, some of the dirt from dropping 13 could go in there. It'd be tough, but
I would argue the more likely scenario is what Jenny was talking about, would be putting the dirt from
Over.
13 over into the Lady
Bird,
Bird area.
yeah.
I don't know that this will be ready, but, if we can do it, we'll try to be as
yeah,
conscientious as we can, that's for sure. Better than hauling it to the landfill,
yeah.
that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
So, this is as far as getting really narrow into what we're looking at with this exact project, this will probably be the number one areas we have for economic development potential.
Right.
But certainly the broader scope of the MRQ will be positively affected by this.
So on the southwest corner, the public storage and the vacuum cleaner shop and the State Farm office, they are,
They will be, their parking lots may be slightly affected, but they'll stay in place.
okay,
There'll be a retaining wall right off the edge,
okay.
but we won't be buying them out or anything. There'll be smaller easements taken.
But traffic going over 13, going to the south or the north, they still could see those places.
Well, this will be 20 feet into the ground, right in this location. People
Yeah,
will be.
13 will be, but 5 will be,
5, the elevation of 5 is going to be within a foot or two of where it always has been.
okay.
13 is going down, 5 is not being affected much.
Okay.
If I could, Mr. Chair, when we met with those business owners a few years ago, one of the things we learned, especially as it relates to the Super America, is the vast amount of their traffic actually comes off of County 34 and onto 5, so it comes from that residential area to the southwest of
Yep.
where they sit.
Okay.
So even though 13 is going down, the quote traffic they would miss is the basic traffic that's going home.
Yeah, okay,
I think Skip is saying
good.
there's
Thank you.
access right here off of Williams.
Right.
That's the number one access to get into Super America, which is located there.
Okay.
Let's see here. Finally, just what our next steps are. I've gone through most of this already, but they're going to continue to try to get the right of way on in hand so we can build the project. MnDOT and Dakota County have to come to an agreement to ensure that everything goes correct with the federal and state dollars that'll be put towards the project. Private utilities have a lot of facilities out there. They will hope to start working later this year, and then we hope to have the construction contract approved by the Dakota County Board in September, and then work on the city streets in the fall, and then the big project would start in the spring. With that, that's what I have for you tonight. I don't know if you have any further questions. I'd be happy to.
Any commissioners have any questions?
I got one question, only because I live in that area. County Road 5 north to get onto 35W during construction.
There will be times when it'll be significant where 5 will not be able, you won't be able to get onto 13 from 5, could be from the north or the south. The primary way that people will get on 35 will be through Burnsville Parkway during those months.
Okay.
So Burnsville Parkway is going to be busier than it already is in the AM. But if you can imagine, we're digging this 20 feet into the ground, there is no way
Right.
that you can possibly keep that open and do what you got to do. Now, they plan on doing the south half first, so including these ramps. So once they're done with that, these ramps should be open, and you should be able to get done. You should be able to get on to 13 once we're done, but, this is probably a couple months. And then they'll go work on this side, and then there'll be severed there. And when they are severed in this location, they are going to provide a temporary access over here for people to get into this area, to help those businesses out. I know. Any other questions?
Speaking of temporary signs is what I was thinking of. I remember when St. Peter closed off the whole Main Street and they diverted traffic to the right and to the left, as I recall. And they had all these signs that were orange, kind of a dark orange with black letters, but the letters were so doggone small. And I'm just wondering who sets the standard for the type of signage that would temporarily be needed to direct people to the businesses.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, it is a MnDOT in their policy has those things laid out. What they do allow is, they'll have detours. So if you're coming from the west, there'll be signs that say 5 closed ahead, use Washburn, that kind of thing. Let's hope it's big enough that it's legible. Otherwise, they have no use. They'll be legible, but you'll have to look for them a little bit. It's never quite as good as having normal access, of course. But they won't allow Menards, Burnsville Motors, and every individual business to be placed on a bank of signs. They'll just say businesses use this type, exit here if you want to get to businesses in this area, that kind of thing. They won't allow individuals to go up there. Otherwise, you could have a bunch of signs that are 20 feet into the air, which then nobody sees anything. All they do is see a bunch of orange. So that's the best way they do it.
I'm just wondering if maybe the city could create a temporary adjustment to the sign ordinance to permit reader boards or something that would be away from the MnDOT requirements. I mean, Jenny?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, when we did Burnsville Parkway, I think it was last year, council waived enforcement 2 years ago. Council waived enforcement of the sign ordinance. As we get nearer to this project, we'll be having a similar discussion with the
Good.
council as far as any type of sign relief or special considerations.
Okay, good.
But very good point. That did help
I
the
think-
businesses out when
I think
we did do that.
We,
so.
as a commission, should keep that in mind so that is talked about. Because I think with the Parkway, it was after the fact.
It's on our radar now, but
Is it?
as we
Okay.
go into any project. So 2 years ago was the Parkway. Last year was Pillsbury Avenue, and
Right.
there was some extra signage. And so it certainly is part of our regular process now. How do we deal with the businesses and signage, seemingly?
Thank you.
Sure.
Excellent
Thank
question, though.
Well, thank you, Ryan,
All
for your
right.
presentation. I don't think there's any more questions.
Thanks for having me.
You've done a good job. Thank you.
Appreciate that very much.
Yeah. Next on our agenda is to review the 2012 work plan, and we all should have a copy of that. And Skip is going to present that to us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I'd like to do is briefly review your efforts last year, and then we'll present to you staff's draft for this year's work plan. You all had a stellar year last year. You obviously accomplished a lot. Just to quickly kind of go over some of what happened, we did begin the process of a business subsidy review last year, and it's actually the next item on your agenda. We'll be hopefully wrapping that up at tonight's meeting. We had our first ever STEM breakfast. You all had a booth there with a number of our businesses. We also, as you might recall, did that small business survey, which we talked about at your November meeting. One of the things you added to your work plan in the middle of last year was attendance at events, and we had attendance at a number of different events by almost all commissioners attended at least one event. Early in the year, we reviewed the subsidy for aging strip malls. Basically, the decision was to keep it as is. As you recall, back at the beginning of last year, we had a number of meetings in which you took up the sign ordinance, and we made a number of changes to the sign ordinance last year, made it very much more flexible for our businesses, and it's been well received. And then you also reviewed the recommendations from our police department on the massage ordinance, which was also adopted last year. This year, staff's recommendation, it was included in your background for your work plan. Just to briefly go through, the My Burnsville folks, which is the effort from the 360s communities, would like to address you and go over. They have a playbook. They've kind of done a somewhat of a little bit of a branding process. They have a committee whose job it is to focus on development and workforce. They would like to come before you. As a carryover from the 2011 work plan, we'd like to do a review of our land assembly policy. The WIB, the Workforce Investment Board, would like to do a business services presentation. Ms. Faulkner serves on the WIB board. I serve on the WIB's Business Services Committee, and we just thought it would be good, based on the emphasis of this commission, to get a better understanding of the services that the WIB provides to our businesses. And actually, Commissioner Grazzini is also on the WIB board. So we have quite a representation here. We'll also review the reader board duration timing later this year. Decision Resources every 4 years now does a business survey, and we I hope to God they're not drilling somebody's teeth. Decision Resources does a business survey every 4 years now, and when we amended your work plan last year, we part of the work plan was that you now would participate in the drafting of the questions on that survey. About 98% of those questions are questions that are carried forward from survey to survey. That way we can track results and changes, but there's always a few tweaks that we need to do to that survey.
Yep. Excuse me, could we just take a little recess
I believe it's construction.
on the roof?
No, I believe it might be construction in the restrooms.
Oh,
We also would bring before you the city's legislative agenda, again for review as we did last year. Then we would ask that at least 2 and up to 3 members of the commission once again be assigned to the BECREC committee, the Burnsville Commercial Real Estate Council. The Burnsville STEM Alliance, you may have noticed in the background that was provided for you, when we started the Burnsville Medical Alliance almost 6 years ago, we created an advisory panel. And it had representatives of a number of categories which met on a quarterly basis with staff and helped staff do the work plan, kind of gave staff ideas and everything else. That advisory panel transitioned to the STEM Alliance when we did that enhancement last year. That panel met in November of last year, and recognizing that the Economic Development Commission's mission statement was enhanced last year, recognizing that they are a subcommittee of this commission, they actually came to the conclusion that they felt it would be better if the advisory panel was actually terminated and the Economic Development Commission basically take all of the responsibility for driving the STEM Alliance. What that would necessitate is we have 2 options here.
we could have at least 2 of you and as many as 3 of you actually become the STEM Alliance committee, and that would entail probably 1 or 2 meetings a year with staff to draft the work plan and review the work plan that's just being finished up. Or we could not have a committee at all and then just have staff bring a suggested work plan to this body at one of your regular meetings, just as we do your work plan. It really would be your call. Whichever we do, the STEM Alliance work plan basically folds into your work plan, so we ask you to adopt that every year. And then the last thing that we would put on your work plan is, again, carry on the commissioner attendance at various events that seemed to go well last year, and we would suggest that we do that again. If you have any additional items that you would like on the work plan, now would be the time to discuss them. This work plan will then, these ideas will go to the council at their all-day work session at the end of this month. Council will review them. Council will either make any changes and/or pass them on as is, and then our chair, Commissioner Slipka, would present the actual finalized draft work plan to the council next month for adoption. Staff would ask for 3 things at this meeting. We would ask that you adopt the STEM Alliance work plan. We would ask that you make a recommendation to council to adopt your work plan. And then we would also ask that you decide which commissioners will work on the Decision Resources Survey, which will be part of BECREC, and if you want a standalone STEM Alliance committee, which commissioners would be on that. And then staff would also obviously stand for questions.
Commissioners, what's your pleasure? If we start out with just the assignments of, to BECREC and some of those, I think Chris and Kevin, you were the...
Currently, Commissioners Andreski and Reavers are
Great.
assigned to the BECREC committee.
Do the 2 of you want to continue with that?
I don't think we ever started. So we need to have a better understanding of what,
They,
we had the event right when we were assigned to
Yeah.
it, and then we need
Yeah.
to get ready for the June event coming up this year, so that's fine with me. I mean,
Mr. Chair, last year, when we did the enhancements to your work plan, we changed the assignments for the BECREC group, and our 2 newest commissioners were actually assigned to that. It actually occurred after the BECREC event.
Correct.
So in effect, neither one of them have had the experience of working with that committee. Quickly, just for a little education, typically the BECREC group meets somewhere between 1 and 3 times, usually in about the February timeframe, to basically plan the one event that's typically held in June to get all of the commercial brokers together and somehow showcase the city. The rest of the committee is made up of building owners in the city of Burnsville. Most of them are multi-building owner participants, and most of them obviously have participated in this for years.
Yeah.
So that would just give you a little idea what that committee would be about.
Any comments or direction? How about then the 2 of you continue in that role and then keep the rest of us posted?
we'll be given guidance then by, I'm sure, the city as to when we need to start working on that June
Absolutely,
event. Okay.
absolutely.
'Cause
You will get something from me.
To me, that's more of a generic committee, whereas the other committee kind of combines with what we're trying to do with our public subsidy policy and getting technology, healthcare, et cetera, businesses into Burnsville. I mean, is that kind of a correct assumption about both committees?
Commissioner Andreski, the BECREC committee is probably the prime moving committee for the attraction of business to Burnsville. I mean, it's those guys, those building owners that
Right.
work with their brokers. You are correct. The STEM Alliance, if you elect to keep that as a committee, we would not be looking at commissioners to be actively engaged on an ongoing basis in trying to attract technology business. We'd be more looking for your input into the work plan for year to year that staff implements.
And the STEM committee representatives for the last couple of years have been Kevin and myself. And I almost think that, I wouldn't mind ceasing that, just to give it some new life. And maybe we don't even need the committee, the advisory committee, because they're pretty organized on their own accord. Maybe we just do it that way.
If I
then have-
could, Mr. Chair, one of your options, now that the advisory panel has recommended that their function actually be terminated,
Yep.
and that the Economic Development Commission be the driving force. If you do not wish to have a committee, again, we certainly could then bring a suggested work plan to this body at a regular EDC meeting, let all of you discuss it and review it
Participate.
like we're currently doing with your work plan,
Yep.
and then you could adopt it for the following year. The advantage to that, obviously, is this is a televised meeting, and
Right.
that would give more exposure to the initiative that we have. And we can certainly do that.
That's what I'd be in favor of.
I agree.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Gene makes the motion. Anybody second it? Rich? Okay. It's been moved and seconded that the STEM Advisory Committee be
Encompassed.
encompassed into the EDC, and we review their work plan at our regular meeting, or at one of our regular meetings.
Thank you, Commissioners.
All in
And
favor?
am I correct that Commissioners Andreski and Reavers are going to continue as the members on the BACRAC committee?
Yes.
We need to vote on that last motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. You're just fired up, Skip.
And then if I could, Mr. Chair, we do need at least two commissioners assigned to work on the business survey, which will probably take place sometime in August. We'll actually have a meeting, and that meeting will typically goes about 2 hours to process that survey.
I'm happy to
Would you do
volunteer
that?
for that. I will do that.
And Gene?
Yep.
Why don't we put 3 on there? And Chris, you go on there too.
Sure.
Well, you're
Whatever you say,
good
Mr.
with
Chair.
you're good with wordsmithing, and
Perfect.
Kevin is too. So
I'll take it as a compliment.
Hang along.
yeah.
Gene is too.
And Gene's good too.
And then, Mr. Chair.
We don't need a motion for that, do we?
No, you do not. What we do need is, if you have no additions to your draft work plan, we do need a recommendation from the commission for the council to adopt that work plan.
Can I just babble a little bit? When we did the sign ordinance and we had the various people, and the massage parlor thing was the same way, we had people come in and speak. And I'm just wondering if maybe twice a year, we'd have some kind of public forum, or where people could come and ask questions, or just make some recommendations. I don't know if, and maybe it would tie in with the Decision Resources Survey. But I just think we as a body need to be maybe more proactive in soliciting input from various business owners or property owners. And I don't know the exact route to take in doing that, but I know many of us talk to business owners, and sometimes it might be better if, not picking on Craig, but if Craig wasn't on this commission, but if he came and stated something, maybe other businesses would tend to say, yeah, that's a smart idea, or I don't know. I'm just thinking of like some kind of forum, and maybe that forum exists already, but
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I would say, I'm not quite sure what your goal, if your goal is just to listen to businesses, I think
I don't
we
either.
try to create those opportunities with the open houses and the STEM breakfast and that kind of thing. The city council does have a public forum before every meeting where even if there aren't issues, that certainly is an open door to come talk about any idea or policy.
But maybe we could do a similar thing if the council would concur. You know, to just have,
Sure.
because maybe there's 10 people out there that have some idea about economic development that maybe they could give us a fresh idea too.
Okay.
I don't know.
I know, I
We'll
got a
let
lot
the
of thoughts
council.
going through my head.
No, but the council watches this session,
Yes.
and so let them watch it, and if they want to talk more, they will.
You think that is part of the Decision Resources Survey? Is that a question for, the survey is for the public? Is that a question for them?
If I could, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Reavers, as I recall, there are somewhere around about 120 questions on the business survey. They pretty much, I think, cover all aspects of the city as it relates to business. And as I said, about 98% of those questions basically repeat themselves from survey to survey so we can have a track record. Yes, I think when each time we've done that survey, when we've gotten done, we have some very strong feedback of what the business committee, our community is looking for. Typically, we're going to hit about 380 businesses when they do the survey. And when I say 380, that's not 380 dials. That's 380 conversations. So it's a pretty in-depth survey, and it does give us quite a bit of information. You may recall when we did the small survey at the STEM breakfast, even though we did not have a lot of partakers in that survey, I did point out to you that, interestingly enough, their answers were almost parallel to the answers from the 2008 business survey on the same questions. The percentages and the types of grades, so to speak, that the city received were almost parallel. So I think those surveys from time to time have actually given us quite a good picture of feedback from the business community. What the survey will not give us is specific feedback on a specific item, such as when you did your sign ordinance review last year. Quite frankly, that's probably the best time to allow business people to come and address you because there's something specific for them to be addressing and talking about. And that's why, even though this body is not charged with holding public hearings, we typically recommend that when you're looking at those types of items that you allow public comment from businesses or residents. And we obviously would, as Ms. Faulkner said, would continue to do that.
Okay.
Mr.
Chris?
Chair, I mean, you're absolutely correct. That was my first event as a commissioner, and when you have a specific topic, it's going to draw people. When you have a generic discussion, it's
Right.
more, how's the kids, the Vikings going to get a stadium, whatever. But if you have a specific issue, that first event, the first event that I came to as a commissioner was, are we going to tighten the regulations on massage therapists, and are we going to change the signage ordinance? Well, we had, 15 people here, not all testifying, and I think you're absolutely right. If you want to get people here, it's got to be specific. Otherwise, no one's going to show
Well,
up.
and I think just by surfacing this conversation, maybe there are other specific issues that will come forth.
Yep.
And I think we need to be receptive to being available to help conduct those public forums if the need arises. And that really isn't on our work plan, but I don't know that it needs to be either.
I would agree, Mr. Chairman. I mean, on those types of issues, as Commissioner Andreski's pointed out, we certainly would encourage you to take public comment when those types of things were before you.
Yeah? Okay. Good. Any other questions for Skip?
I think it is a motion.
Mr. Chair, we would like a motion from the commission to recommend adoption of your work plan by the city council.
So moved by Gene, seconded by Kevin Sturts. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries. Okay.
So, Skip, is it your understanding that motion also covered adoption of the 2012 proposed STEM Alliance work plan? Or do we need a separate motion for that as well?
Commissioner Sturts, typically that work plan is rolled into your efforts, so yes.
Okay, thank you.
Review the business subsidy change, item number 6 on our agenda. And Skip, are you Jenny's the presenter? 5 minutes?
Chair, did we skip number 5? Review economic development incentives?
Oh, geez, I did. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Item number 5. Jenny was giving me hand signals and I couldn't decipher what she was saying.
Shake hands.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chair. In your two previous meetings in September and in November, we discussed economic development incentives. And at your meeting in November, you asked staff to draft a policy for your review. The parameters of back at that meeting that you gave us was that the policy look at attracting new business, the policy look at expanding existing business, the policy look at help on businesses that are renovating, that it target our STEM businesses, and that there be some sort of a number of jobs as a qualifier. And you asked that we bring back a draft incorporating all of this relative to a revolving loan policy. As staff prepared to do that draft and had in-house discussions, one of the things that became apparent is that if we created a revolving loan policy, the parameters that we would have to have in that policy would probably be very onerous. The other thing we discovered is that the city is not a bank, and that we obviously would put ourselves sometimes in competition with our banks. So what we bring before you tonight is actually a little bit of a change to that, in that we're proposing that we actually create a loan guarantee policy. The objectives of the STEM loan guarantee policy would parallel the parameters you gave us. It would be the attraction of new STEM businesses to Burnsville. It would help out on the expansion of any of our existing STEM businesses here in Burnsville. It would help out on any improvements or renovations that properties owned by STEM-related businesses do. And the one parameter that we added, and actually we need to give a tip of the cap to our EDA attorney, who reminded us that technology businesses have a lot of equipment acquisitions that they have to go through, and those can sometimes be a little tough to get loans for. So we've actually added that if a STEM business is looking at equipment acquisitions, that would be one of our objectives, is to help us there. The criteria for this loan guarantee policy would be, if you're a new business looking to come to Burnsville, you would need to be bringing at least 10 employees, and at least half of those would have to be either have a 4-year or a 2-year degree or certification within one of the STEM disciplines. If you're an existing Burnsville STEM-related business and you are looking to expand your existing facility, the parameters of the criteria that we would suggest is that you be adding at least 5 employees, and again, half of those would have some sort of post-secondary work in one of the STEM disciplines. If you're an existing Burnsville STEM company that you're going to be doing some sort of renovation to your property or your building, or if you are purchasing equipment, our proposal is that you have at least 5 employees, and again, half of them have the STEM background. We would request in our criteria that there be a documentation from the lending institution that this loan guarantee is necessary for the business to get the loan. And because it is focused on STEM, retail businesses would not be eligible for the loan guarantee. The types of, Mr. Chair, I believe Commissioner Grazzini has a question.
I'm sorry.
In reading this the other night, I observed one thing, and I was just thinking out loud, and I'm thinking out loud again here. I have a company that employs 35 people in office. I've also got a company that employs 150 people across the country. I wouldn't be eligible for a loan if I brought my business here. And we're a very clean business.
Without knowing the background of your employees, I could not answer your question, Commissioner Grazzini. But if none of them have backgrounds or degrees in a science,
They do as far as that.
okay.
Yeah. So I mean, we meet all criteria, and I don't think we plan on moving to Burnsville at this time. We're in Egan, but a company such as ours would be left out in the cold because it's not a STEM type business.
If your employees have those types of disciplines, we would probably classify that as a STEM type of company.
That definition would have to be a little better refined.
I would think so. In other words, I think there's a lot of firms around, and not retail, but area.
But for example,
you brought a business in or something like that, be the same type of deal.
but you do have engineering type people in your employee?
No, but I do have secondary education people.
Right, and you probably have people that work
We've got
with.
one or two engineers, but that's not a lot of them.
Okay, but then you also have people that do something in the area of math that have post-secondary education.
Our game is construction. So
I know, but I'm just saying,
Commissioner Grazzini does point out one point. I mean, this policy as we've drafted it focuses on our major development initiative, that is STEM
Right,
businesses.
right.
If the Economic Development Commission wishes that the policy
be looser.
focused on all businesses, that is certainly something you can recommend to council.
I think a couple of things. My greatest concern anytime we have any type of interventionist policy like this is that we're thwarting competition. And so, the education piece kind of bugs me a little. And this is someone with advanced degrees, because what if I have clients that have technology-based consulting firms that don't have a 4-year degree that are brilliant. And so there's that piece that kind of bugs me a little bit. Also, I think there should be a delay time, because if you're working with someone who's got a technology-based idea. What if there's a firm that's considering Burnsville, but they're not networked or they're not in cahoots with some of the people that are networked within the Burnsville community, and they're thinking of moving to Burnsville, and all of a sudden they see someone that's getting some assistance, and then they back off, but they might have a better idea. So that's a little bit of a concern. Also, is the entire loan guaranteed? Is this like a local SBA program, or?
Commissioner Andreski, as it was pointed out in your background, the proposal would be that we would guarantee up to 50% of the loan,
I
not to
missed that
exceed
when I
$20,000.
skimmed that. I missed that, so I apologize. And so that would be the only concern that I would have, though. With we just need to make sure we're not thwarting competition. If it's obvious that there's not any alternative and it's going to create jobs, I think that's great. Otherwise, I think we have to be careful.
Mr. Chairman? So it sounds like we have a couple of definitions as regards the STEM nature of the business. One could be designating the entire business as a STEM business. Another could be, perhaps as Commissioner Grazzini was alluding to, that the expanded positions or the company as a whole has X number of positions that would be defined as STEM. You mentioned engineers as a possibility. Certainly IT people, programmers, would probably fall within that as well. So that's something that I believe this commission might want to discuss
Further,
further.
yeah. That's kind of what I'm thinking, too. Any other comments? Craig?
No, I agree. I think you're going to need to define, if Gene has 3 engineers on staff or 5 engineers, does that qualify as STEM? If he's in the construction business, where you're going to need some lines drawn there.
Well,
Mr. Chair, if I could, that would be the exact type of feedback we'd like from the commission.
right.
I mean,
Right.
if the commission believes that the policy should be broader in that any company beyond retail should potentially be able to have that loan, that would be the type of feedback that we'd like from you. We drafted the policy to focus on STEM because STEM is our major economic development initiative.
Right.
But certainly, if you want to recommend a much broader policy,
Well, that's why I think we probably need a little more time to cogitate this. I mean, before we sink anything in concrete.
It's good.
Cogitate?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Mr. Chairman,
Kevin?
question and a comment. Question would be for Skip. When we talk about 5 or 10 employees, does an employee in this case equals 1.0 FTE, or how narrowly or granularly, how specifically have you defined employee in the proposal?
Commissioner Sturts, we would probably follow our TIF policy and our tax abatement policy, and there we do take into effect FTEs.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. And then,
But again, if the commission wishes a different
Parameter.
parameters, such as if part-time employees, if you wish to have them excluded, that would be certainly something you could recommend, and we could bring you back another draft incorporating that.
okay,
And if you only want full-time employees
Sure.
to be counted.
Which is something I think we need to consider
Sure.
as an economic development.
Well, after looking at this the first time and now tonight the second time, I think this is something we need to keep working on. But I don't think we are at all ready to move ahead. And I guess I'd like to get more input from other persons in the community, as well as maybe the council. They'll have opinions too. And some other business owners.
And I think I'm not opposed to private-public partnerships. My greatest concern is that you're putting existing businesses or people that haven't asked for assistance at disadvantages, because Craig or myself or other business owners that have done it without that or work without some of those collaborations, all of a sudden looking to someone within that field, all of a sudden is getting assistance. I mean, I think that's unfair to existing businesses and potentially.
Are you working with the Vikings or not?
Well, no, and the Vikings are unique. Listen, the Vikings are a great example, because that's why I support a public partnership with the Vikings. Because not that Burnsville's. Let's get the Vikings here, Skip. Let's do it tonight. We're going to announce it. But no, the Vikings are a unique situation. NFL teams don't fall out of the sky every day, and so that's a situation where I would say, hey, let's work together and let's make this work. But if another financial consulting firm were to come in here and you were to give them subsidies on their building to where their rent is or their mortgage is half of what I'm paying for rent, and I've built my business to 2 locations, et cetera, well, that would probably frustrate me a little bit.
Yeah. Greg?
I want to point out and clarify, this is a loan guarantee. This is by no means money given to the business. This is help in obtaining funds through a bank or.
That would be correct, Commissioner Reavers. As it is proposed to you, what we would be doing is we would be going hand in hand with the business to their banker, and the city would be saying the city is willing to guarantee half of the loan up to $20,000. In discussing this with 3 of our community bankers, staff has been told that this would be viewed very favorably for them getting the loan, and it would possibly be one of those things for a business that would be very close to meeting the currently very stringent underwriting standards for loans, actually getting the loan. It is not the city giving a business money for coming here. Obviously, the hope would be that the banker has made the correct underwriting decisions and that business pays this loan back and we never give the bank any money.
Right.
Is there a risk involved that if one of those businesses goes south, that we'd be on the hook for $5,000 or $10,000? Absolutely. That risk is involved.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
A couple comments. As we've talked about this and brought this proposal together over the last several discussions, of course, we've talked about the importance of targeting businesses and/or jobs to the community. It's as opposed to just opening it up to any sort of business. Discussion tonight leads me to to comment that we need to, as a commission, consider: are we wanting to bring targeted businesses versus jobs? How do we want to define that? Do we want to leave it broad, like Skip mentions? Which is more important, having a targeted business or a targeted job? And then, as we talk about jobs, to Commissioner Grazzini's point, do we want to talk in terms of number of targeted jobs a company brings versus the ratio? Because as this is worded, Gene, your company would have to have, as I understand, Skip, half of the jobs it brings meet the STEM requirements versus just bringing 5 or 10.
We're not coming from Burnsville.
Exactly,
Not that
exactly.
that wouldn't be a great place, it's just, it's an example of.
But it's a good example because
That's a good example.
with 130 employees, or let's say you brought 100 employees, then are we saying half of them would have to be STEM related, or are we saying 5 of them would have to be STEM related? So I think that's something we need to sort out.
50% STEM according to the.
Right,
According to
right.
The proposal that's before you, half of their employees would need to have those types of educational disciplines.
Right, and I
And it have
understand.
to be a minimum of at least 10 employees covered.
Yep, I understand what it says, but I'm saying this commission, I think, needs to clarify what we think would be best, a ratio versus a specific number.
I personally don't have any problem with the ratio at this point.
Well, the other issue is, define underwriting guidelines. I mean, how do we monitor the underwriting guidelines, that they're the same or in comparison without this guarantee? Because that's, quite frankly, how we've gotten in trouble as a nation, is the FHA has guaranteed X amount of percentage of loans. And I think it really goes beyond just guaranteeing 50% of the loan, because we have to have a government now mechanism in place to assure that the banks aren't making those loans more leniently available to business than otherwise would be available. Because that's a big piece of this. If you and I go in and try to get a business loan, and someone who qualifies for the STEM loan goes in to get a business loan, and they know half of their risk is going to be subsidized by a taxpayer dollar, I mean, there's a different game going on there, even subconsciously, if you don't have a policy that's different. And so, I mean, that's to me the biggest concern of this program.
Yeah.
Although I think it's not a bad program if it's structured correctly and if it's unique enough, and it's like, some of the projects that have taken place where we've helped bring jobs to Burnsville. But that's, to me, is the biggest concern here, is that the underwriting guidelines are going to be different for one mechanism versus another, because even though the intent shouldn't be there, we have to have some type of checks and balances as a city if we're going to ask taxpayers to bail out a potential loss. And it goes back to capitalism with profits, socialism with losses, and I think we need to be very careful there.
Kevin?
Mr. Chair, just a comment to Commissioner Androsky's remarks. I think that by targeting STEM businesses or STEM jobs, I think we've established that's a high value economic development move, higher value than attracting, say, retail or just a broad general business category. And so I guess our hope is that higher value increase in jobs and increase in economic activity, because it's a STEM business, would compensate for the difference in risk that we would be assuming for this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if we were to target just any business, then perhaps the value of those businesses may not be as great to the community, and so we'd have to look harder at the risk we're taking.
Yeah, you'd have to hope. You'd have to hope. I mean, I still think underwriting is an issue. But, yeah.
I guess I'd like to see it opened up to, for instance, to businesses that meet the qualification, and the word is businesses, with special emphasis, I don't know if we can do it that way, special emphasis on the STEM type firms. Does that make sense to?
That makes a lot of sense.
Isn't that how it's written now, is targeted towards STEM
Well, it
business?
kind of leaves everybody except STEM folks out.
So to clarify, are you saying we should open it up to beyond STEM businesses?
That's what
And so have our target then be STEM-related jobs?
Businesses and special emphasis on STEM. That's
Okay.
what I'm saying.
The exponential component of a STEM type business is absolutely invaluable. I agree 100% there, but the failure and the risk is just as great, if not greater. And I know this from some of the venues that I've been involved with, through grad school as a professional the last 15 years, working with angel investors. And so I still think we need to make sure that we cover our taxpayers with the
Without,
assurance that the underwriting guidelines are not more lenient, knowing that half of the loan is subsidized by the government.
But I think that's built into the
I see.
proposition,
I
isn't
would,
it?
and respectfully, I would disagree. But yeah,
No, let me explain. As I understand what you've explained, Skip, the loan guarantee would compel banker A to give a loan to a business that wouldn't otherwise be qualified for the loan. Isn't that what we're talking about?
Not exactly, Commissioner Sturts. What we are hearing from the banking community is that and let me step back. We are hearing from the banking community and we are hearing from the business community that the underwriting criteria right now is very stringent for loans. The bankers are telling us they have lots of money to loan. The businesses are telling us they can't get a loan, and there's a disconnect. What we are hearing as we presented this in theory to 3 of our community bankers is that there are some companies that are kind of right on the line, that this, in fact, could make the difference. Would the bank loan money to a business that, after they go through the underwriting process, said, we don't think this business could ever pay this loan back, but what the heck, the city's on the hook for 20 grand? That's not the feedback we got from our banking community. I don't think our banking community would make that kind of a loan. Where this policy would help is that one that is very close, that probably a couple of years ago they would have made this loan and it would have been a very, very good loan. We are not trying to help give loans to fly-by-night companies
Okay, but-
or startup companies.
But Skip, that wasn't what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, and I believe you just said, a company would not get the loan but for our guaranteeing. And I believe that's what Commissioner Andriske is talking about. Is that what you're saying?
That's
Is that what
correct.
you're hearing? And that's what I was talking about. That but
that's
for the
scary.
guarantee.
And that's scary.
They would not, in other words, their underwriting has shifted because of our guarantee.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I said
that's my
earlier.
concern.
And those are moving targets.
I would rather have the city buy a building and lease a favorable lease to a company than guarantee half a loan. That's riskier, personally. But that's not what we're talking about.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, how we got on the guarantee concept, when we last talked about this, we were talking about a revolving loan. That was the idea that you had come up with, and we had talked about, because we want different tools that our competition doesn't. And so this is a tool that our competition doesn't have. When we started talking about the loan and crafting it, you asked us to go craft something, we can respond to it, we can have better dialogue, and this is great dialogue. But I just want to kind of remind you how we got here. When we started talking about us being the lender, we're starting to get into underwriting stuff that Skip and I aren't familiar with. We're, as a city, giving these loans. So we tried to come up with a better way. Who knows how to give loans? The banks. And so if we partner with them and they have some skin in the game, we're optimistic that they wouldn't just give them to anybody. And if I just can real quick, up to 50%, it could be 10% of their loan. They could get a $100,000 loan, and the city guarantees up to $20,000 or 50%. So the amount of the leverage, we thought we could get more bang for a buck by leveraging versus being the lending institution, so to speak. So
Correct.
that's how this came to be, and certainly it's great discussion. How we craft this and where we go from here is, I'm interested.
Go ahead, Chris.
Because of my background, I just want to add one more thing. The conventional wisdom says if a loan might be perceived to be riskier, as you just alluded to, perhaps the interest rate should be higher, and maybe there's a way for the city to work with the bank to subsidize that higher interest rate and to, to incur some of those costs, assuming the business is making the payment. I don't know if that's plausible, if that's even within the realm of legality, but
But that's what banks are for.
absolutely. But if banks are doing their job, we wouldn't have to have this discussion. And so clearly, there's got to be a need for some incentive. To you see what I'm saying, Mr. Chair? And so I think maybe there's a way to not be on the hook for half the principal, but be on the hook for some of the interest rate risk sacrifice that the bank is making. And I think that might be a better, more immaterial risk by the city and for the taxpayers. And so maybe if the rate should be 5%, if there was no issue, and all of a sudden we're as a city stepping in and saying we want this to happen, even though your underwriting guidelines don't otherwise say so, because it's a STEM loan guarantee, maybe we subsidize 1.5% of the interest rate, and we pay the bank a little more love in the first couple of years until that business is up and running. And that would be a much more it would be less of a burden on the taxpayer, assuming the loan goes bad 2, 3, 4 years down the road. Because once 3, 4 years down the road, typically the track record of my clients anyway is that we're a profitable entity, and so maybe that's just an alternative to subsidize an interest rate that otherwise would be higher in a normal environment.
Commissioners,
Go right
if I
ahead,
can,
Jenny.
any application would come before you as well. So and to the council. So you're suggesting that buy down the interest rate, basically.
Absolutely. The risk might justify 7%, 8%. If the market is 5% and they're not going beyond the market because of the current environment, maybe we come in and say, hey, for a couple of years, we'll help you with a higher interest rate or with a risk factor versus
The risk
a
for it.
50% principal guarantee is just a dangerous proposition.
We can lower that.
Yeah. Well,
It's
Make
not
it 20.
necessarily 50% principal, it's up to 20,000.
Yeah.
And as Jenny pointed out, it may be a $100,000 loan, so our exposure is
it's only 20.
20,000.
Right. And so there's a cap. Yeah. Thank you for that correction. Yeah.
What if we tabled this topic in the interest of gathering more thoughts and ideas, and then communicating with Skip, if you can be the sounding board for this group, and then we regroup at our next meeting and see where we're at? I mean, or don't you like that?
No, absolutely, Mr. Chair. We certainly, at your March meeting, could bring you another draft incorporating your discussion and anything else we hear. For clarification purposes, I think the new draft, if I'm understanding correctly, should be open to all businesses except retail, with maybe some sort of caveat if you have a STEM base to you. And we should possibly, and again, this would be something we'd need to check out with our attorney, look at, rather than doing a loan guarantee, possibly an interest rate buy down if the loan warrants a larger interest rate. That's what I've heard so far.
Well, the other thing that keeps coming into my head from when I was involved in business, you go to the bank, you negotiate the deal, and then the bank says, oh, by the way, you're going to pay all the attorney fees, and there's no control over that. I mean, the borrower, Craig, maybe you're witnessing that as we speak. I mean, so suddenly, is the city going to have legal fees associated with this? And if so, we can't just let the city pay for that, but the legal fees surrounding it need to be addressed. The other part of it that I do like is the input you obtained from some of the localized banks. And I think maybe that part of it should be expanded. I mean, where we talk to more banks and get more input, because maybe they could stand to absorb the legal fees that could be normally passed on to the city.
Mr. Chair, two comments.
Yeah.
I would be comfortable or interested in hearing how our potential businesses, either new potential businesses or potential expanding businesses, might feel about an interest rate subsidy, which I think is a creative idea, versus a loan guarantee, versus any other thing we might do related to what we've talked about in this type of vehicle. So that's one. The other thing is, when we're talking about guaranteeing part of the principal, where in line would we be under this proposal in a default? Would we be shoulder to shoulder with the bank? Would our debt be junior to the?
Yeah, we'd be subordinate.
We would be
We'd be
subordinate.
last in line.
Okay, last in line for them to pay. So okay.
I mean, that's
I think there's any question.
how these normally work.
Okay.
It goes without saying.
But no, it's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Commissioners, that was the same thought if we were the lender, so to speak. If they default, we're out the cash. So
Okay.
Is it
Gene?
worth us to have a couple bankers come at the next meeting?
We certainly could invite them if you like.
Could they open up our eyes a little bit better?
I'd just like to get a better feel for what businesses how we could help them, what would matter to them.
A
I think that's an individual.
bunch of money.
Well, the number one, Skip, the number
We
one,
gave them a whole bunch of money.
the number one concern right now with small business is they can't get loans.
They can't get
So
loans.
this is a good discussion to have. The real solution is Federal Reserve raise rates. Banks have to lend money to make money. End of story. But we're not there yet. So
So this allows us to leverage, as Jenny pointed out. And it's a lower risk because we're not lending our money. Chris, you talked about putting the taxpayers' dollars at risk. Skip or Jenny, could you help us understand again the source of the funds we would use to back this guarantee?
Right now, Commissioner Sturts, that would be a decision made by the EDA and the City Council. We have not really broached the funding mechanism. We obviously were hoping to get a policy crafted first and then let those people decide. One of the funding mechanisms we've already talked to you about would probably be where it would come from: EDA levy, land sales, taxes, the normal sources we would look at.
Okay.
Again, Mr. Chair, I think what I'm hearing is come back with another draft in March. Possibly get either some businesses or some bankers at your meeting and/or get some additional input for them and bring it to you.
Yeah, maybe they could just write a letter or send an email or something, but don't spend any money on a consultant. I mean, I don't think we want to go hire a consultant for this. Besides that, we don't have the money.
Point taken. If I could, Mr. Chair, when we bring you back the draft, the current draft, the costs that we were looking at were moving costs, build-out, expansion, renovation, and equipment purchase.
Yeah.
Are we okay with those types of costs still being in whatever draft policy we bring to you?
Sure. Yeah, I like that part.
Thank you.
No, no problem.
Anybody else?
No, no problem.
No problem? Okay.
We will bring another draft to you at your March meeting. Thank you very much.
Good. Okay. Now we're ready for.
One thought, before Skip, before you leave there, or you can put it here. I thought I heard Jenny say that we will approve, this group will approve every loan. Did I hear that?
Commissioners not approve. You review and make a recommendation. The City Council
council
or
would
the
approve.
EDA would actually
But-
be.
So I need some money, and I come before this group first, then I go to the ADA, and then I go to the council?
If I could, Mr. Chair, the way it would work would be a business would have come to us and
Staff.
said, I have met with a banker. The banker is telling me that he's aware of this program, and this program would help me get a loan. We would then, as we would with a TIF or a tax abatement contract, we would draft a contract. That information would all be brought to this commission. Similar to a TIF or a tax abatement contract, this commission would make its recommendations to the EDA. And then it would go to the EDA, and the EDA would make the final decision.
So the thought is whatever we're doing is a bank has gone through a review process. Staff has then created a contract detailing both sides, skin in the game, so to speak. Then you will have reviewed and made recommendations, and then the EDA will review and either grant or not grant. So it would be
There'd be enough checks and balances.
there would be checks and it would be a rather lengthy process also.
Okay.
Okay. Satisfied?
Yep.
Okay. Moving on, item number 6, review the business subsidy change.
Commissioners, this is a housekeeping item. There was a statutory change that was made in 2008 regarding tax abatement. And basically, the change, the way that our policy is currently written, there's a maximum amount of tax abatement that the city could issue that cannot exceed 1% of the current levy. That's how it's currently written. With the statutory change in 2008, it's changed to net tax capacity. So that is about 2.5 times more than the current levy amount. So it actually would increase the total amount that the city could give in an abatement circumstance. So we're seeking to make that housekeeping change to be consistent with the statute. We've also, because of this change, there may be future changes that are made to the statute. So we've accommodated for those in here so that we don't have to do another housekeeping change if the limits are increased in the future.
Do we need a motion to recommend this?
Yes.
Anyone care to make that motion?
Make a motion.
Rich makes the motion. Second?
Second.
Second by Craig. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, updates. Burnsville STEM Alliance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In keeping with what you did earlier on your work plans, our proposal would be, in the future, we would provide you with an activity report as it relates to the STEM initiative. We have done this with the advisory panel on a quarterly basis. We'd obviously do it with you on a bi-monthly basis. You were provided with the one covering the months October through December. I would just point out a couple of things in the activity report. Obviously, we were all at the STEM breakfast. The feedback I have gotten from the Chamber of Commerce is that they got a number of very positive reports about that breakfast. I believe that'll probably be something that we will continue to do in the future. I also am aware of 2 companies at that breakfast that did network with each other. Well, I should say 3 companies. There were 2 networking things that went on, and there were 2 potential pieces of business that might come out of that meeting. In November, staff did attend the Medical Device and Manufacturers Show on 2 different afternoons. That show typically has about 9,000 attendees that walk the floor. It's a rather large show. We have partnered with DEED and a couple of other entities over the last few years. The good news, so to speak, of that is none of the other entities showed up. So in both cases,
It was Burnsville.
we had the booth to ourselves for 2 afternoons. The bad news is we're not sure that DEED will continue to work this partnership because the cost of that show is rather expensive. The booth is $5,000 for a 10 by 10. So we may or may not be partnering with them again.
Find somebody else you can slip in.
Actually, I believe Commissioner Gruzini, I think there was 5 or 6 of us partnering to keep the cost down low, and we were obviously very happy that everybody allowed us to have it to ourselves. We also, in December, as we have for the last couple of years, Burnsville had a booth at the Life Science Alley Conference. One of our residents, who is also a regulatory affairs consultant, actually spent the day with us and graciously introduced us to a number of his contacts as they walked the floors. And we actually ended up at lunch meeting with one of his contacts, who is a vice president from one of the device firms in town. And she graciously said that she would love to come and speak in some of our classes, and we have hooked her up with the STEM Magnet School, and I believe they will probably have her either speak and or do a mentoring program. We would continue to provide you with these types of updates on a bi-monthly basis. And then the only other thing that we probably should cover is, as you all know, Commissioner Arrow has resigned from the commission due to the fact that he is in a retirement state now and is going to spend half of his life in Florida and half of his life in Minnesota. And at the work session last night, the city council did appoint our alternate, Commissioner Reavers, to a regular position. And then this June, they will give you another alternate when they do their normal appointments. That is the updates that staff has. And then, of course, we would answer any questions if commissioners have any other questions about anything.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, if
Question?
I may, quick question, how is the CVS progress? Any changes?
We are in continuous meetings, and one of our planners, Mr. Chris Slaney, and I had a conversation with the property owner last week. It is our understanding that somewhere in the spring, they are potentially looking at demo and site work. And actually, the ball is pretty much in the property owner and CVS's court. All of our approvals were given last fall. So it is still kind of moving along.
Thanks.
Okay. Good. Any other questions, comments? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved by Craig, seconded by Rich. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you, and we'll see you in March. If
Thank you all.
not before.
Who knows?
Oh, Arrow Drapery, open house, or ribbon cutting, February 23rd. I thought you wrote down.
don't remember.
Well, that's something, but you sent out the email, so, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you all. Thank you. Good job.